We are.
It says we're live,
We're probably not live.
that's this is our little intro tonight. Since I didn't have an intro, is to discuss whether we're live or not. But I think we are by now, and we're live with Patrick Compton of Polymath Park. How are you, Captain Polymath? Right? Or what's your title on your channel?
It's Captain Compton or Polymath Park with Captain Compton. I'm debating changing it or not. I just thought it kind of work well with the name.
Well, I'm happy to have you, and I've only known you for, well, I don't really know you. That's why you're here. But I've only heard of you like a couple of weeks ago. Wasn't it when we talked
Yeah,
2 or 3 weeks
maybe
ago?
2
So
Yeah.
I have to admit I don't know a lot about you, but I hope we can learn a lot tonight. And thanks, Alexei, for being here. You may have to do some interpretation work tonight.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me, Captain Compton. It's nice to meet you.
I think you both are polymaths.
Heck yeah, that's what it seems to be.
I think, it's kind of funny that term jack of all trades gets associated with polymath, right? But I think jack of all trades is what I am, right? Because I'm a design build contractor. But you all are polymath, or it's like a step up from jack of all trades.
I don't know. So the whole phrase is actually a jack of all trades is a master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So taking like the polymath lifestyle, you can go really far with that. And I've written a bit about this back in the day, or like a few years ago, where you can now pursue that nowadays because we have the internet. Whereas if you wanted to be a polymath like 50 years ago, it would be much harder. But now you can at least get a lot more value out of it because you can watch people giving lectures online basically at like the top level. Like I watch lectures from Cambridge and Princeton and Stanford that are just incredibly professional and very well done. And that way I can get a ton of information at the top level, whereas people couldn't do that in the past. So in that way, we're kind of a new realm of being human and educating ourselves, I guess.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome. You mentioned that about the universities. It's like MIT has their coursework. It's like, I guess it's sort of outdated, but it's still relevant. I don't know if you've ever watched their lectures, but that's kind of what I do. I search for these sort of free lectures online from universities. It's pretty awesome that we have that. I remember, because I'm an old guy, right? I remember when the internet wasn't even around. And I remember the first time I was able to go online and start searching things, I was like, I can learn physics now. Because it was like 30 years ago or whatever, right? And I still haven't learned physics, dang it. But I'm trying. That's why I have people like you and Alexei on to talk to, so I can maybe learn something.
Well, I mean, we also have like paid services where you can learn with all the diagrams that you can interact with, like I think brilliant.org and Coursera. I've learned from Coursera and udemy.com as well. And that's like a little bit more, not so much high level, but like you get to have more one-on-one interaction with the teachers, or just more like hands-on interaction, so you can learn at your pace.
You actually get to have interaction with like instructors or teachers on Brilliant?
I believe you do on Coursera. Yeah, on Coursera.com. And a few other like where they host teachers. Yeah.
Harvard EDX has online courses also, and I took one of their architecture classes, and it was awesome. Yeah. And they had some great professors on there. But that was a paid course, but still, it was not that expensive. I didn't have to pay $100,000 to go to Harvard.
I'm a big fan of Action Lab. Have you guys seen that?
Oh yeah.
I think he does good stuff.
Yeah, actually, I followed him since he started actually, and I've watched him grow over the years. It's really neat.
Yeah.
So Patrick, what is your theory of everything? Did you submit one to Kurt during the challenge?
No, I've talked with Kurt just a little bit, like in a couple of email exchanges, but I'm still very much like I'm very tentative when it comes to that. Like the concept of like hubris and our ability to like think that we have everything figured out can kind of like cloud our judgment, I think. But so like the theories that I do come up with, I want to be like very, very careful with. So like I have one that's kind of based around like goal orientation and things that are more based around like therapy for now. But what I'm noticing, like at least when I look at things like more skeptically, I'm seeing where we can see correlation between different fields, and that's kind of what I'm trying to zero in on, is like where there's overlap, like in neuroscience and psychology and physics and things like that, and where there are where there are theories that people are putting forward that don't work with the other ones, and that can be problematic. So, like,
well, I mean, it sort of encourages discourse, though, right?
yes.
I mean, if you, it's like, Alexei, I'm sure you've had a lot of challenges to your theory of everything, and I know Brad Voorhees, I've challenged his theory of everything, not that I'm qualified to, but it's caused us to talk with each other, And if you're like us and you're adults and you can debate things without being mad at each other, then everybody learns from it, I think.
Right. I mean, the biggest thing I'm working on right now is this idea of universal embodiment. I think I'm on like the 5th or 6th video on my channel on this. The idea is, like we were talking about before we started streaming, just this whole concept of being a universe experiencing itself through a human vessel. Like, immediately when you hear that, it comes off super cheesy and flowery language, but when you take that seriously, or at least like live by that, you can go very far with it. Like, you can integrate endless forgiveness and patience and senses of empathy and relation with everyone and everything.
Say the concept one more time.
The idea of the universe experiencing itself through a human vessel. Like, basically, you are stuff, the amalgamated forces of electrochemistry and gravity and all the forces working together to make the human that can actually introspect. So we are the ability for the universe to introspect upon itself, I guess.
How does that play out as far as creation, though? If you're someone like me who thinks that the universe was created for us, that sounds like that we were created for the universe.
Right. I mean, another angle of this I'm trying to address is the nihilism and the no things that Buddhism tries to embrace. And I don't know that Buddhism has that all together in a way that the human organism can experience its life to the best, because it requires the abandonment of self. And for you to be able to pursue your best self and live your best life, that requires self. So trying to get that together, where the idea that the universe kind of does what it does, and this is like Spinoza talking. Spinoza was very much about the idea that the universe is as it is, and the things that happen are just as they would have happened, no more, no less. And so we do have to accept a part of that, but we get this lucky ability where we have free will, or what looks like free will, at least, and we can go extremely far with that. Like, we can garner a lot of that in ourselves.
You're my new friend. You believe in free will?
Sorry?
You're my new friend. You believe in free will? A lot of guests I have don't believe in free will.
Yeah, I mean, I
forgot your stance on that, Alexei.
Well, I don't know if he just said he believes in free will. He said the illusion of free will. Do you believe in free will or not?
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, snap.
Let's clarify that.
Yeah. You have to slow down a little bit, because I'm from Tennessee and we don't talk that fast here in Tennessee.
Yeah. Like,
you think free will is an illusion?
It's hard to say that's not the case, given all the people that are way, way smarter than me that have examined this for decades. Like,
I'm not impressed with all those people. If they all, agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's people like Robert Sapolsky, I guess, human behavioral biology and neuroendocrinology. Andrew Huberman is kind of getting to this as well as Sam Harris. I mean, the whole point is it's useless to live like that. Like, it's completely counterintuitive and counterproductive for you to tell yourself that you don't have free will. And like, I was just listening to Noam Chomsky talk about this a few days ago on, was it Mind Body Awareness channel, I believe. He put it like, right, he hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's like we act and behave as if we have free will. Like, that is how we live. So it's impossible to deny that plays a major role in our life. When I look for proof of it, when I look for empirical logical evidence for it through neuroscience and physics and electricity and all that, I don't see it. I see causal neuron chains, and or like an input and an activation of initial input, and then cascades of neuron chains that we kind of are at the far end of, which is kind of like a Daniel Dennett take. But again, it's pointless to think that way. So like, I'm trying to work it out to where I can live with agency and tell myself I have agency.
I was going to say, when I was reading your bio on your channel, you did mention art, and you mentioned some human aspects of creation, right? So I know you're not totally against the idea that that the universe is a gift to life instead of the other way around.
Oh, it's certainly a gift. I mean, I'm going to try to upload a video on this soon. I forget the name of the website, but there's a breakdown of like the rarity of the human experience and just how like rare it is that you actually exist. And it's like a 10 to the 45,000th power chance, or like 1 in 10 to the 45,000 power that you exist just in this galaxy. And then it's like some 10 to the billionth number or whatever that you exist at all. So we're in an extremely privileged position. We're in an extremely lucky place where we are. And reflecting on that, like from the whole universal embodiment thing, that definitely gives me like constant gratitude and awareness. Like that gives me more clarity and peace of mind and agential control, I guess you could say. If that makes sense.
It's kind of funny because to me, and I want to hear you talk more, Alexei, instead of me talking, but to me, it kind of comes down to this sort of battle between, I know it sounds like a Star Wars episode, but between good and evil or something, because we're, you know, if we don't have free will and we weren't, and the universe wasn't created for us, it puts us in this sort of, plant food or, zone where we're just here existing. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like what you said when you said it doesn't serve a purpose, or what was the phrase you used?
It puts us in an existential quandary.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
what do you think about that, Alexei?
I mean, I think we have free will, but to a degree. I talk about the faucet of creation, which is like your golden spot, the you that exists without delusions. And so the you that exists without delusions is a very pure version of yourself. And when these different ideas like media projects onto you, or you use your free will to create an experience, you're jumping into a fractal of your own, of human creation. So I think, but that ultimately will spiral you back towards the laminar flow because you won't feel good. So you'll be going through karmic cycles of delusion the second you use your free will. So imagine a faucet of water, and as you get to the edges of your spiritual potential, it causes spirals of delusion that ultimately bring you back to the laminar flow of your creation. But then there was a second part. What was the second thing you just said, Artisan?
I don't know. I had visions of vortexes again in my head. When
I'm all about vortices and how we have a natural node of creation, but then our free will takes us off center. But through karmic cycles of delusion, will bring you back to center to where you continue to drift along that laminar flow. So I think there's a free will, but it ultimately, and so that's where I was going with it. It turns to selfishness versus selflessness. And if you're 100% selfless, then you'd be going with that laminar flow of creation. No ego, no push, no pull, always just going with a flow. But the second you're being selfish, in quotes, you're going against the natural flow of creation.
I thought it was interesting. You mentioned some sort of concept, Patrick, about the sort of a narcissistic view of the universe to think that maybe it was created for us, or something along those hubris. Yeah. So to me, though, I think it's more of a you can celebrate and appreciate nature without being, without exercising that hubris, right? I mean, just because we're grateful for it doesn't mean that we have to be, our ego has to get in the way. I don't think.
Right. I mean, that very much lines up with this, or the approach I'm taking that I call universal embodiment. Like, what you get from embracing yourself as a universe experiencing itself is instant humility and also instant like gratification and gratitude from your unique and rare and privileged position. So you can be extremely humbled by the idea that you are a speck basically on a rock in this giant vast cosmos that's 13.8 billion light years across, and yet you are this incredibly introspective and like conscious being, and you're also like this. I guess I should put this more formally. I talk about like the middle verse. Like we have the macro verse, which is the giant extents of the cosmos as far as the human imagination can comprehend. And then you have the microverse, which is as far as the human eye can see and can also comprehend, down to like the smallest Planck length or whatever. I think the farthest we can measure is like 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. And in between those giant ranges of conception is this human condition where we're in the middle verse. And that middle verse can kind of lead us astray because we can get caught up in the whole human narrative. Like we think we're very special. We think we try to like reinforce our own ego, and there's a lot of like biology behind that. But when you like extrapolate on this whole idea of the macroverse and the microverse as well, like it brings things brings things together. I guess kind of hard to describe, but
I get that 100%. I call it the lower verse. So if you wanted to say the bigger realms of creation, like the cosmos, the entire universe as a whole, I would say that's more related to the lower verse. But I like how you use the word verse as like the second word in that. And then our dimension is the universe. And then inward to denser, like Planck scale, would be closer to Noviverse. So very similar concepts.
What was the last thing?
Noviverse.
Talk about ego, Noviverse. Just kidding.
I thought it was funny.
It is funny.
Yeah.
I was just making a joke for Patrick, so he would understand.
Yeah, my last name's Novitzki, so I named it the Noviverse. It's the denser realms of our creation.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should talk about that more.
I think Noam would have a tendency to confuse nihilism with what am I trying to say? In other words, most humans are grateful, and it's more of a spiritual thing to think about the universe being created for them. It's not ego driven. I think he comes from since he's an atheist, right? He comes from it from a different perspective, I think.
Yeah, I believe so.
So I don't know, if I say something wrong about someone, you say no, he thinks this. Don't hesitate.
Well, I haven't talked about like how he actually professes himself. I mean, personally, I don't like the term atheist because to me, that's just a non-indoctrinated human. Like we all come into the world not believing, and then somebody teaches us what to believe. And so to be able to keep like pure clarity and like be very decisive on your own opinions is extremely difficult. But
but there's an evolution of thought that happens, because I myself grew up in the most Southern Baptist church you can think of, but I have evolved sort of out of that to embrace a broader spectrum of spirituality. So I think atheism still applies to a certain extent. I wasn't taught what to think or what to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes any sense to me. I think atheism, maybe we do enter the world maybe more ignorant than atheist. I don't know.
Yeah.
Atheism has sort of a connotation to me to it. It's more of a purpose-driven thought.
Just to help everyone that's watching, and even myself, honestly, atheist means you don't believe in a creator. Is that correct? Or
yeah, that's the general idea from what I hear.
It's more about not believing in. It's not really associated with a creator per se. The way I've heard it described is, then they will say atheists or get upset if you say that, right? They say, oh, it doesn't have anything to do with the creator. It has something more to do with not believing in really much of anything. Right? Yeah. It's not just not believing in a creator. It's not believing in this sort of nihilistic view or whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's very nihilistic. Is the no thingness there, but the issue, like what I take issue with is there could be a creator. It could be that Nick Bostrom and those who are supporting the idea of the simulation theory. I mean, that this whole thing could be simulated. It could be actually designed as like an alien child's kindergarten experiment or whatever, as the metaphor goes. And of course, then the question goes like, then you're pushing God up the line, like who created that creator? And that's where it kind of gets to be like, well, this is kind of I don't know if it's illogical to think that way. Like that's the thing. We don't know what started the Big Bang. We like to theorize that it was like bubble universes colliding or whatever the other 100 ideas are, but we don't know. And to say that there's not something out there that like an existent entity that's out there somewhere that could be interacting with us and could be we could contact, I think there's value in thinking that way. I don't know how much value there is in pursuing that so much to live the best life, if that makes sense. But I'm still like, I don't
Well,
know.
and each person has to assess their own value system, right?
Yeah.
Where something doesn't have a value to you doesn't mean that to, a nun, there's no value into thinking that, you don't need a spiritual creator instead of a super alien geek creating this universe.
Yeah.
They would more like to think that, it was the God of the Bible that created the universe. I don't think there's any harm in that. Honestly don't think any of us are going to hell for thinking, whatever we think, you know.
Yeah, I was brought up very much as a fundamentalist Christian up until about 18 years old.
Yeah.
And I definitely went around trying to convert people, and it got really, really nasty for a while there. And so I went like atheist I proclaimed myself as atheist for a few years, and then I've reworked the spirituality in my life. I mean, so I should give it a couple minutes to describe this. So John Verbicki, you should both look at, spend like a good 20 hours listening to what this guy's got to say, because it's very intelligent. His idea is that there's he calls them the nuns, like NONE. These are the people that are proclaim themselves to be spiritual but not religious. And then when pressed upon that, they don't know what that means. Like there's no actual description for that. They just say I'm spiritual but not religious. So there's something there. Like nobody seems to have an answer for it, which is the problem. But there's something there. There's something that we're trying to get at there, and that's hard. Like the idea is how to construct a belief system, and I believe like what I'm writing about is leading me to believe that that's very much a personal process, and you have to borrow elements from religion to do that. So the elements that I've been able to borrow have been specifically like the ritual and the symbolism, not so much the liturgy or like dogma and the answers to eschatology. So like eschatology would be how religion gives us answers for the problem of death and our incredibly strong fear of death, and that's why a lot of religions seem to have that answer. So I believe that's more of a personal journey, and the dogma or like strict the strict systems of behaviors and the strict belief system, I don't think you should get that from an ancient scripture. I think that's something that needs to be very much like a journey. But when it comes to the symbolism and the rituals, I use statues. Like I have an Avalokiteshvara statue to remind me of the concept of that which hears all sound and sees all activity everywhere. That's not exactly the definition of that, but that and like the memento mori, like you have a skull on your desk to remind you to like remind you of your mortality, to like stay on the projects and stay dedicated. Things like that, like those are major elements from religion that I'm trying to keep in my life, and as well as eating. Like I'm trying to very much incorporate. Oh, sorry, my camera went off. Incorporating the idea of like respecting the meal, like the Native Americans would do when they were to when they killed a deer, they would eat the whole thing and they would say a prayer over it, and they would reflect upon the sacrifice that animal is given. I try to do that with every part of my meal now. Like I look back and like I think the grapes, like the grape of the vine. I think the spinach of the leaf, and like the meat of the chicken. And I try to. It's weird. Like it's weird embracing this, but I try to like visualize the factory farm. I try to visualize the preparation of the meat. Like I've prepared chicken before, and I've prepared fish and things like that. So I can visualize that, and I can reflect it based on my own memory and my own actions, just what goes on into that. And so I can really get deep into the idea of like relating to the animal sacrifice and relating to the plant sacrifice as well, because plants do have a phenomenological experience. Plants do react to being prodded. Plants will scream 100,000 hertz above the human range to call for aid from other animals. They will actually call specific insects to defend them from other insects, and other animals to defend them from animals. This has been tested.
We got to eat something though, man.
Sorry,
we have to eat something.
yeah. That's the thing. Well, when you eat it, the idea is to deeply embrace that and deeply like respect the sacrifice that's going on into it. Because everything we do when we take in and consume things is always some form of a sacrifice. For me, I would go vegetarian if I could. I just have Crohn's disease, so I have to eat meat, unfortunately.
Anyways, well, I was going to say, when I was younger, I went through a similar, when I was going through my spiritual transition from, staunch Southern Baptist to, more of a broad spectrum of, I used to go hunting. I was, obviously born in Tennessee, and hunting is something you just did, right? It was just like what it was expected, right? You had to have your shotgun and you had to go hunting. And I remember the last time I went hunting, I was like, I just blew this little bird to smithereens, and I was like, it just evaporated. And I was like, what are we doing? We can't eat this bird. We can't, we just took this life. I never will forget that feeling of, I'm never going to kill another animal. I know a lot of people, all of my friends are going to make fun of me now, but this is for someone in Tennessee to say this, it's a huge admission. Okay. But excuse me. But, I remember that feeling of, oh, I'm just going to stop hunting. And of course now we target practice with my, we still involved. I'm still involved in the sport of it, but I don't go hunting anymore. And it's funny because if you're on any kind of spiritual path like that, you'll come across those feelings at some point, in your life. I think,
Well, and that's where it comes down to respect, right? I mean, if you just go around shooting little birds with shotguns, and then in my case, I was a spear fisherman. So if you just go around shooting little fish that are like this big, you're just kind of going around shooting stuff for fun. You're not actually like respecting nature, and in my opinion, you're not really like respecting and being proper.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you're going to shoot something, make sure you can actually eat it, appreciate you. You know what I'm saying? So there is a level of spirituality there.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to throw in, you mentioned that you don't think there's actually a good definition of spirituality. What I've done with my work is basically, I don't think I defined it, but I defined it for myself, and I did it through physics and talking about the raw prana, like the raw chi of creation. Because I see religions as tools. They're somewhat, all religions say, in my opinion, all religions basically say the same thing, which is love, like just love, unconditional love, and forgiveness. And what does that ultimately do? It allows you to get to your center spot, which is that faucet of creation. Because if you're not forgiving, if you're not loving, you're basically holding assumptions and expectations that take you off center, and you're exercising your free will. And that's where it all just, it's a huge circle, right? I could go on forever. It's a big circle, selflessness.
No, I agree. And I think that I attribute a lot of my spiritual, learning from my mother, where she would come back from these mission trips that she would go on, and she would question her own spirituality, her own Southern Baptistness. She would go visit Korea and China and the Jordan, the Middle East, and come back and talk about these philosophies, and that sort of had a it's when that reminded me when you said all religions tend to have the same sort of message or whatever.
Well, on death, specifically the death thing, there's a lot of variance that needs to be respected between religions, but there's a lot of correlation on the answer to death, at least.
Yeah. You got your camera fixed. All right. Awesome.
Would you just say there's a lot of correlation with the experience of death, or can you expand upon that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the word is, eschatology. Apparently, I just learned this, and it's essentially addressing the human fears of death that we all seem to be like. I mean, it's the thing that we avoid thinking about the most. Like, and you can turn to Sheldon Solomon, or Ernest Becker wrote about this in the 20th century. I mean, and I think Freud also talked about it as the death trip, which he started taking seriously in his last years of his life. Sheldon Solomon calls it the terror management theory. So the things that frighten us the most are the things that we try to avoid the most, and the thing that frightens us the most seems to be death, or at least that's the thing that we try to avoid the most. So it's really depressing to think this way, but like we pretty much distract ourselves from death all the time, and I don't know how much I agree with that, but when I go to think about it, it's certainly not a very comfortable feeling. And that's it seems that religions have been around, like a lot of religions that we research or that we know about throughout history have tried to address this problem.
Is it strange not to be that concerned about it? Well, I think
I've heard people say that too, and I don't know.
What do you think about near-death experiences then?
That's really crazy. So I actually made a note to talk about this. So it is incredible what like research has been done on this, and what we've seen from the notes that doctors and nurses take when patients are on their deathbed, and what they experience when they have out of body experiences. Um, I've had out of body experiences a few times. I actually had one a couple weeks ago, which was very epic. Um, and a lot of my lucid dreams come from me starting out in an out of body experience, and then it transitions into a lucid dream, which is also very strange and trippy. The It's hard to talk about this the way I'm about to without sounding like trying to take the fun out of the party, but we can sink electrodes into the temporoparietal junction and the anterior cingulate cortex, and actually make the patient leave their body. And this is the craziest experiment I've ever heard about, but this is real, and this has been replicated. They can stick an electrode in and actually adjust the height of the person, and adjust like how high they're flying off their body and other things like that. So when you talk about the idea of the OBEs being all in the head, well, I mean that's pretty solid evidence that it's all in our heads. And the idea of a spirit, like when we think of the spirit leaving the body, that we tend to relate that to the out of body experience. That's all I know about that, and that's all I can say about that for now. I'm definitely trying to look at that more objectively, though.
I think we can disconnect our consciousness from that, though, can't we? I mean,
That's
I
what
think
we do.
part of what you're talking about is a physical phenomenon, right? Where part of it may be physical leaving your body. The other part may be that our consciousness is deconnectable, or
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah.
what am I trying to say? There could be a part of that where that part of it's physical and part of it is sort of because I do think that our consciousness I do think we have some sort of connection to our creator, and I think we were given the ability, maybe not necessarily through prayer, but that's one experience, or meditation or whatever. So I get what you're saying, where these out of body experiences are, it's highly physical, maybe possibly. Um, I don't know if that's what you're saying, but I think there may be another element to it that we're missing there.
Yeah, I mean the way that when I've had my out of body experiences, it is very much like dimethyltryptamine and other like hallucinatory experiences when it feels like more real than real. Like although it's not exactly like that. Like when you leave your body, and when you have lucid dream experiences, it's my theory at least is that the sensation is more real than real because you're not actually using your physical body. So like the wear and tear that your body has experienced over the years is not there. Instead, you have like a newborn baby's body. So you have like perfect vision, perfect hearing, and all that. And that like when nurses record this, when patients come out of their bodies and they look back at their bodies, it's described as being extremely real. Like it's just like it's just like they are who they are. And there's, I mean, the research that's gone into that, like when we look at their neuron excitations, we see the temporoparietal junction, which very much is involved in perceiving ourselves in space and time, and like the process of proprioception. And we also see vestibular activity, although the vestibular system's like doing two things there. It's like telling the body that the body is in a laying position with like the inner ear thing, but it's also telling the body that it's out here and like facing like this. So that's really interesting to me. But we do seem to see like excitation of neurons that are involved in body mapping, and like how we perceive our body in space. And I could go on with that, but it is.
So you think it's more that our brain is creating the image of seeing us above, we're seeing ourselves below ourselves. The brain is creating the image and not actually being out of the body. Is that what I'm hearing you say as far as the...
Yeah, it's like the brain has an image of what the body is doing, and also the brain's interaction with the body, and how that is involved in space and time, and that can be messed with essentially. That can be altered to the extent that you can perceive yourself as actually outside of your body, and like the orientation is just thrown off. But it's not just your orientation, it's like all of these factors, like all these things that add up to like your vestibular system, your proprioception, your mind-body perspective and like your position in space, all of that can be shifted over here, essentially.
That's pretty interesting because
this
yeah,
also happens on planes. Sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
this happens naturally to pilots. This is actually the number one reason for plane crashes, is because pilots will have out-of-body experiences when they're in these weird G-force areas, or they're just in a weird place and managing this craft in the air. There's been stories of pilots actually looking back at themselves from the wing of the plane, like they're sitting on the plane wing and looking back into the cockpit. So this can happen from lots of different sources. Like it can happen naturally when you're going to sleep, which has been my case. This can happen from the electrode and actually controlled by science. And then it can also happen from the plane. And yeah, pretty crazy.
That's interesting because I've never really thought about the idea that the brain can have that, even if your eyeballs haven't seen yourself at that angle, your brain could still create that vision of you laying there, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
Yeah.
think about.
Huh.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to,
Do you think that's what's happening, Alexei? Do you think that
It's challenging to really say for sure. I think that some people have. I mean, that's different. Out of body experience is related to a near death experience, but your heart doesn't stop, your brainwave activity hasn't ceased, right? So there's, in my opinion, there's a difference between a near death experience and an out of body experience.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify. Like, there's been stories of people where they tons of stories. I think Kevin Smith, the actor, died for a little while and was revived, and he said it was like just blackness and there was nothing there. But I mean, I wonder, like, I've heard other people say this, that it's just blackness, but it's like, if you don't have any experience there and nothing to have established a memory from, then how are you remembering that it was just blackness?
But maybe that was them right before they woke up. I don't know. Yeah, I know. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
I mean, right, your brain still had to create that image of blackness, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think that's fascinating, though, that you can turn a dial and essentially choose what height the person is visualizing the room at.
It's almost like you're tuning a television.
I'll send y'all the link to that, or to
right, because your brain
I
is
haven't heard
creating
that yet. It's interesting.
your brain is creating the image, right? You think you're seeing yourself from above the room, or above your body, but actually it's your brain creating the image inside your brain, right?
Yeah.
Well, it circles back to what Brad was saying the other day, where ultimately all we all have is what our brains produce, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Like the brain is in its own little vacuum, and it's not supposed to be touching anything.
Yeah, but
it sends signals by our senses.
He combines that with the whole hologram thing, so I'm still on the fence.
I was trying to follow that. That's so deep, like the idea that your consciousness resides on the edge of a black hole. I struggle with physics and I struggle with astrophysics, but I'm trying to get better at it. That is really something to think about.
That was literally one of the questions I had for you, because I'm going to do this survey of everybody to see if they believe the same thing, or I hate to say believe, think. I'll try to say think the same thing that Brad thinks.
Right.
That our universe is a two-dimensional object on the face of a black hole. What do you think about that?
It's important to like think differently about dimensions too. At least that's what I learned from Brian Greene. It's not necessarily like 2D means only two dimensions. Like it's not just X, Y. Like you can also just think about that as another state of matter, or like state of fields. I think like when we talk about like the fifth dimensions or like 11 dimensions, like Michio Kaku talks about, like you have to stretch your perception. Like honestly, you have to go beyond what I call the middleverse. You really have to like think outside of space or time plus the other three dimensions. Like there's, I think Action Lab did a good breakdown of this, where he showed like what it would look like for another dimension to interact in our perception of four dimensions.
I think I saw that one recently. He had the sphere going through. Essentially.
The 2D universe is easy to imagine, right? Because
I think it's an easy way to describe, though. It helps if we can turn our three dimensions into two dimensions. Now it's easy to describe the next dimension. So I think it's kind of a useful tool.
That's what I was going after, was that if you can extrapolate from that 3D sphere interacting with a 2D plane, it starts to help your brain think about, okay, now how does the 4D object interact with the 3D universe?
Yeah, I really want Brad to talk to Bernardo Castro. That's you guys should look this guy up.
Oh, guess what? Who's coming to my channel in April?
You having Bernard Castrop on?
Yes.
No way. All right. Congratulations,
Yes.
man.
I met him during tow.
Right on. Yeah, I've been
He
following
actually
him for a
he
while.
actually helped me out. He bailed me out on a point I was trying to make.
He understood it and was willing to actually discuss it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
I was stumbling. Obviously, I was out of place amongst all these intellectuals, but Bernardo just picked it up and was just like, "Bam! I know what you're saying," and said it. And I was like, "Thank you, Bernardo."
Yeah, he's very talented with bridging the gap.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea, his proposal is that the universe is in a disassociative state, and human consciousness is what it looks like when the universe is disassociating with itself, which kind of gets in line with my own theories on the matter, but also like kind of goes against them. It's hard to think that way, but like the way he describes it makes a lot of sense, and so I spent many hours listening to it.
Say the dissociative thing again.
It's human consciousness is what it looks like when the universe is disassociating with itself. So like when we, again, to answer the question of death, when we die, we will be back into the most integrated form. And this is what I get with universal embodiment as well. That is the most integrated that we can be with the universe. Our atoms will literally be dispersed, and this is the normal state of the universe in general, is a calm dispersion of entropy and
Entropy. Yeah.
Equilibrium, right? Everything's kind of going towards equilibrium.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely like that. And but we're also in a very interesting position. Like the way he puts it is uncomfortable, and this is unfortunate because a lot of physics and math reveals things that are not very comfortable, but it's like uncomfortable truths, you know. But it also is putting us in this position where we are a unique state of the universe, extremely unique, like 10 to 45,000 power or whatever, and that is something to be respected and something to be recorded, I believe. So it's cool that we're recording this right now. It's like the universe is talking about it.
Well, I think I agree with that statement almost, and I like to say that our experiences are somewhat distortions within the natural flow of space-time. And the only reason that we have an experience to begin with is because we're undergoing some type of distortion, which translates into a personal delusion, a personal perception or experience.
And I think some of that is what's involved with the idea that we can never like completely relate to each other. Like we have to, like Chomsky talks about this as well, the idea of us relying on language, as well as Wittgenstein. Like we pretty much have to narrow our thoughts down into words and try to get them across to people as best as we can. There's somebody that put it like, the instant that my words leave my mouth, they're already being misinterpreted. Like that's. But
the other side of that is that being human, like sometimes I know what someone's saying. I get what they're saying with only a few words coming out of their mouth. Right? Yeah, like I feel it. If you're that connected with somebody, then you almost know what they're, just by the look on their face or the look in their eye.
And I think that's how people communicate with animals in a way too, is through empathy, through like through, and it's gonna sound woo, but through love, through vibration, like through the natural. Yeah, you can communicate with people that speak different languages just through. I understand what you're saying, Arson. Yeah.
Yeah, and the more you know someone too, I mean, it's almost like sometimes I can just guess what's going to come out of someone's mouth, or not even out of their mouth, just what they're thinking. Almost.
Well, we fill in the gaps too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't mean to describe it like we're like struggling to communicate with it. We also have this incredibly adaptive system. Like that's the other part of the brain and the brain-body relationship is we're incredibly adaptive, and we can get a lot from body language. Just look at how the deaf communicate. And yeah, if you were to go to another country, like you could learn the language quickly, but you could also get a lot from visual cues. And
definitely,
yeah. I mean, it makes sense that like before we've only had language, we think, for like the last, I'll leave the number back, but it could be like 20,000 years ago. It could be like 250. I mean, I guarantee that for a good 250,000 years before that, we were using body language, and we were.
See, that's what I'm getting at, is that I don't think they necessarily had to have that much. That I think humans were probably more connected because they relied on each other for survival more than we do now. So I mean, it's just like if Alexei and I were living in a cave, we had to go out and hunt something together to survive. We're going to go through the woods going, we may be just making noises saying, I'm over here, I'm over there. We didn't really need language per se.
Well, and someone walks over holding a fish in their hands like this and like pushes it towards you, that kind of means take my fish, or I'm offering my fish.
We believe that, like in visual science, we believe that the eye narrowed down. What is it? The sclera of the eyes, like the white sections of the eyes. they're more defined in humans because we hunt, and so we'd communicate by being like, yo, look at that over there. We wouldn't have to say that. We just like use our eyes. Like, yeah, that's and so
that's why we invented hats, though.
Here's a random question: do you think that people have become less familiar with body twitches and like subconscious motions because of the development of physical language?
I don't think so. I think that we just we don't consciously acknowledge it, but we definitely unconsciously acknowledge these things because we have a whole field of psychological manipulation that you can go on YouTube and watch videos of this, which I really wish YouTube did something about this. And you can buy books on like what is it, dark psychology or whatever. And I've been advertised this stuff too, which is really lame. You can really manipulate people just by doing it like this or like directing.
Right, everyone around you will do this too.
Yeah, I do that. I do that on purpose. If somebody's saying something I don't agree with, I'll go.
Like this, and we end up doing it like
I'm like, really?
Yeah, and we'll do it unconsciously. Like we'll signal with our body without even realizing we're doing it.
I got a kick out of that video. I watched one of your videos where the empathy video where the girl was claiming to be an empath.
I feel so bad about making that video, but I try not to show her.
Well, no, it's okay. It wasn't. It didn't come across as negative. It was a great point, though, right? I don't know if you want to kind of describe to Alexei.
But I haven't seen that, so if you could, that'd be great. Or one of
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this so many times, especially since studying psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy. There is an extremely easy route to adopting diagnoses as labels and running with them. And this is so hard to talk about because, especially if you're a psychologist, because it can get you into trouble really quick. It can sound like victim blaming. And it can sound like a bit like medical gaslighting too, which is another term to be examined. The idea is that the person in question is she's calling herself an empath. And so we've had the concept of empathy for a long time. And this isn't even getting into like psychological diagnosis. This is just an example of like how people will run with these labels. So we can end up calling ourselves an empath, like as if I have some special ability that other people have. And no, that's not the case. Everybody has empathy. We just exercise it to one degree or another, and that can be expanded on. Everybody can get
it's
better.
It's a scale from all the way over here to over. Yeah, that's a scale of empathy.
Yeah, it's not some special power. And so this has gone very far on Facebook. If you look at the groups, we have 66,000 people that declare themselves to be Arcturian starseeds. And it's like whatever labels we can attach ourselves to, we'll take them if it makes us feel special. And again, the way I put that sounds very derogatory or whatever. What I mean by that is that our egos very much need to be solidified. And this is something that can be examined at depth as well. Anything that the ego can do to strengthen itself and master itself, that's going to be taken on very easily, I believe, because it is strongly a biological instinct to survive. I believe that the ego is there to keep us alive. And this is not just me talking, but I believe this is something to be considered. If in the past, when we were in smaller tribes, if you didn't act right, you would be excommunicated. And so if you find a label or if you find a role in that tribe that you can ascribe to, you will be valued and you will be safe. Does that make sense?
It's funny you mentioned the word tribe because I feel like that to some degree, social media, the internet and social media has created more of a groupthink. And I think that's where sadly, I think people are wanting something or needing that. So they join these groups of, I'm a starseed, I'm a this, I'm an empath, I'm a that, And for me, it's kind of sad. And you mentioned, I was going to ask you, you mentioned that something like you have to be careful. Are you a licensed? Are you a clinician?
I am technically a practitioner. I've had about 100 hours or about 90 hours in cognitive behavioral therapy training on Udemy and other websites, and I'm certified as a cognitive behavioral therapy practitioner as well as RABT and ACT, rational and motive behavioral therapy, and acceptance and commitment therapy. I don't have my PsyD. I am in school studying that, but I prefer learning online, and it's also way cheaper as well. But you can only do certain things. Like there are rules in this country versus rules in the UK about like what you can do. And basically, what I try to do is act as a middleman between the between the giant gaps that we have in psychotherapy. So the majority of psychotherapy that goes on today, the patients don't see the therapist for like weeks at a time. And if you want to have therapy and if you want to have that done effectively, it needs to be every day. It needs to be, if you can, you need to be trying to see the person at least once every few days and be acting on the therapy every day. So that requires like a sponsor or requires somebody to be checking in on you. And the therapist can't necessarily, or the licensed therapist in the field as a or clinical psychotherapist can't do that. Like they don't have time for that. And they only have like 50 minutes as well. Like the general therapy session only lasts for about like 50 minutes. You're not going to get to know somebody even in like 2 months of that. It's going to take many hours to understand a person's condition. Again, most of us don't even know ourselves. Like most of us can struggle to describe our own condition. So expecting someone to like be able to pick that up, it's a team effort, is what I'm saying. And I'm glad that these fields exist, like the practitionership, I guess you could call it.
I was just curious because you were very seemed to be cautious in some of your language. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, the CBT helped with that for sure. Communication helped.
I have a question about. Obviously, we talked to a lot of people regarding the UAP thing, and I wondered. I always like to get some people's opinion about their view on life, in the universe or out there, other galaxies or whatever. What do you think? I mean, you don't have to say what you think UAPs are, but what is your overall thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, we call them UAPs for a reason. They're not UFOs. We don't know that they're technically flying. This is a thought I had when I was watching one of your previous PiFis, people I find interesting episodes. The thing is, like the UAPs that we're seeing now, like the Tic Tac especially, the way they could be moving, they could be warping space-time with a wormhole, and that's the best proposition that I've heard so far. So you could have the ship like this, and then it just does this, like the space around it. And so the sensation that is felt by the ship, like that could also be an answer for why the ship doesn't collapse. But that could also allow actual aliens to be in the ship. Whereas with other forms, it could be like much more dangerous. Because in those instances, it's not even like you're moving. It's more like space and time is moving itself to you.
Right.
It's like being on a boat that's in a river, and like you're just going with the speed of the river, So when you warp space time, you're going with the flow of space time.
Right.
So you're not moving relative to space time. You're moving relative to a different frame of motion. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's been really good, and the evidence that I've seen for that has been pretty strong. Like I was a strong skeptic about this for many years, and in the last couple of years, I've kind of changed my mind on the issue because we have a lot of people that are coming out in the military that are talking about this that don't really have any like prior motivation to want to like support their own narrative, and they're already making plenty of money, so there's no really reason for that. Although that could also be that they want fame because they have so much money and they want another source of joy. But when you listen to these people speak, it's like they're speaking from the heart. I mean, that sounds really cheesy and also really dangerous thinking, to think that you can just tell somebody's being honest because they're speaking from the heart. But I've heard other people talk about that too, that have interviewed them. And when you're interviewing someone like face to face, then you have the body interpretation like we were talking about before. You have the genuine connection, like as good of a connection as you can have.
Well, you can look at it you can look at that on an analytical basis, right? I mean, you can, if you think they're being honest, that you're just, if they're giving off that body language, there's nothing wrong with, you know what I mean? It's saying their heart is in a good place just means you think they're sincere about what they're saying, right?
Well, that's where it comes down to. You can easily convince a child. I'm using a very generic example. Like you can convince a child that if they jump over the 2 bricks, now they're a champion or something. And so like it could be a very similar thing to where the people that are coming out and revealing information are speaking from the heart, but they were lied to begin with, is what I'm getting at.
Right.
I believe in UAP. I
It
believe
comes down
in
to motive, really,
and all that. But like
right.
I'm just saying that there could be manipulation involved. that makes it seem like that someone speaking from the heart is telling absolute
Well,
truth.
that's kind of where I was going earlier when I said I was kind of sad about these or these groups of people are sad to me because I feel like a lot of those people have been manipulated. The people who think they're star seeds, or you know what I mean. I feel like
I
those are the
think half of
people.
the world has been manipulated.
Yeah,
Well,
I
again,
think
I don't think if you look at it from the evolutionary psychology perspective, it isn't as sad. It's more like an ego necessity to survive. And so when you look at people that way, like they're basically just trying to survive, and that's something that you can empathize with because that's what we're all doing to some degree or another. If that makes sense.
Totally does. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not. That's why I said I'm not criticizing them. I have that empathy. That's why I said feel I feel a sadness
No,
towards
I know what you're saying.
you
Yeah.
know.
Well, at the end of the day, it comes down to awareness too, and that's why I always circle it back to like knowing what causes the motions you make within your life. Are the motions you do, have they been triggered by another person? Where's that person coming from, right? So always understand every motion, every action you make, and it's hard to be tricked by people like that.
Right.
And the other thing I was going to ask you too is there are people who think that Earth is the exoplanet, and that we actually came here from another, thousands, millions of years ago, or whatever, hundreds of thousands of years. I think that's one of the Brad Voorhees things, right?
The whole Earth came in, or just life originated somewhere else and then was moved
Originated somewhere else, like we were an exoplanet. Like Earth was an exoplanet to them, so they came here to escape.
So that's not panspermia then. That's
similar.
like yeah. When I hear about panspermia, it's usually like the idea that alien life started somewhere else, and like microbacteria was
like a meteorite or something.
Yeah. That's really interesting too. Yeah.
That's actually a pretty well. I mean, there's plenty of scientists that believe that, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we got hit by a meteor that came from Mars. Like we have rocks on Earth that came from Mars, and how did that happen?
That's how we got our water in the first place, right?
Through meteors.
Yeah, I mean, you have an asteroid impact and it like knocks a piece of Mars off, and then it ends up on the Earth, which is not that far fetched to think that would happen because of gravity, because the Earth like sucks in all these things, and the bigger the mass, like the more it attracts.
Or we could have started out on Mars, maybe. I don't know. That's not.
Or it could have. But again, that kind of like pushes it up the chain if you want to look at it that way. I mean, when you look at like our DNA, we are like 99% related to chimps and all that, and bananas. We're like related to. We have DNA connections with like all forms of organic life on this Earth. So that's where I would side with more like the panspermia side of things, where like
a single cell was on an asteroid.
Yeah,
I hear that.
But again, I mean, you should look into Nick Lane. I shouldn't be like throwing names out, I guess, but whatever. I mean, no, I should.
But I don't know why the ether keeps telling me that life evolved on Earth, but at some point couldn't our DNA have been altered by if this was an exoplanet? I mean, couldn't a form of humans have been upgraded?
Yeah, it could be. I have friends that go into heavy detail on this as well. You can take that pretty far. I mean, the stories that we have going now, like the running story with evolution, it's very strong. Like we can describe that in detail, but that could just be because we've had like thousands of people trying to examine this and finding the best story, whereas the DNA alteration kind of idea just hasn't been explored enough.
I'm saying it can be a combination. I don't see why it couldn't be a combination of
where
most of the DNA was I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I don't know. My imagination tells me that we have enough original DNA, and there didn't take much to alter it to become.
Well, it's challenging it's challenging to break it down to the human perspective. So let's just imagine like an island that comes up in the middle of the ocean, but now all of a sudden trees start growing on it, right? They were blown. The seeds were blown in from the wind, and then the plant then has over long periods of time evolves in its own way to best be suited for that island. So maybe you could say that the human life, the original seed came from another planet, landed on Earth, started evolving. Now here comes an ET species and plays with that evolving. Like it could be a variation, a combination of a million things.
But isn't there some kind of case for what I'm talking about? Because when we branched off from apes, their evolutionary, I mean, they evolved to some degree, right? But they didn't evolve. They didn't evolve like we did.
This might be a controversial statement. From what I saw once, and it might have been a History Channel thing or Discovery Channel, they said that chimps and humans were interbreeding for a little bit, and then they branched off. So it was like species came up, chimp, human, they interbreeded, and then they broke off. Do you know what I'm talking about, or?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I'm saying my question is, how did we evolve? Look at our evolutionary process versus the chimps' evolutionary. They haven't really changed their evolutionary.
Yeah, I mean, it's because we were forced onto the savannah. I mean, that's the running story that I've heard at least the most is that we, the rainforest changed, or what was it? We were like forced out into the savannah by predators, I guess, and also because of weather change. I'm not sure, but there's something that like put us into that position where we had to like fend for ourselves and use our brains more. And we had already evolved the opposable thumbs, and we had like chimps have a pretty enlarged prefrontal cortex as well. I think the assumption is that like evolution realized that it could expand on that prefrontal cortex that allows us to say no to things and also like extrapolate on ideas, especially in the left ventral frontal cortex. And we ran with that. Like we had the ability to pick things up, and we started making tools. I mean, chimps, they're rocks. Like the chimps that we see today, they're rocks. And they also beat us in memory games, like Vsauce sort of thing.
I'm not saying they don't have intelligence. I'm just saying it's obvious that we advanced quicker, right? They're not flying airplanes around and going to the moon like we are.
Yeah, I think. I mean, from what I understand, it's us being put into, or the chimps. Essentially, those chimps, or we shouldn't call them chimps because that's not what they were. Whatever they were then, were put into a position ecologically where they had to adapt in different ways, and they had the tools to do so. And you can look at the archaeological records too. This is really fun too. I did a video on this a while back where you can see like like we have where our clavicle is or whatever, where our spine comes up to our neck, that's vertical. Whereas in chimps, because they're hunched over, it's like this. So that hole is like more towards the front. And you can look through time, like through archaeology, where that starts to like stand up, and we start to get like a straighter spine, and like our ribs start becoming like more straight out and things like that. It's really interesting.
Yeah. At what point in time does it? Now it's like, okay, that's no longer a chimp. It's a hominid or like a human. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think there's like a certain angle of your vertebrae. I'm just kind of like joking around, but at a certain point, like they change from one to the other, and that's where it's like words sometimes I don't know, create barriers, right? I don't know, because it's all the same thing, just one going this way, one going that way, life branching. I don't know.
Well, it looks like there were a few different ways it went, because we have like records of the Denisovans and the Neanderthals and all the different subspecies or whatever, like before they became Homo erectus, or that was the one that remained. We don't know if there were like wars between different species and all that, or how that went down. But as more evidence, like as more archaeology becomes evident, we have more to see.
I think
the coolest thing I've seen is
I think I have like 3% Neanderthal.
Sorry?
I think I have like 3% Neanderthal.
Yeah, I think we all have some percentage of it. It's really interesting. Yeah.
I had a DNA test done about 5 years ago. It's kind of funny.
The discovery I've seen was done in, I think it was 2015 with the Ring Star Cave, where they found it was something like 300 pieces. They had like multiple complete skeletons because they were preserved way in the back of this cave, which insinuates that there was some ancient burial ritual. And these things they're dated. I gotta look this up. I think it was like 200,000 years ago. And that's been our biggest source of information thus far, I believe.
I always wondered if burials started out as just a practical thing of, hey, we don't want to attract the big mammoth, woolly mammoth, or the big saber-toothed tiger, so we're going to move the body to the back of the cave so that it doesn't attract. You know what I mean?
Bury it.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So the animal doesn't eat it. You don't want wild animals to come eat your dead friend.
And maybe it evolved into sort of a spiritual thing, but maybe started off as a practical thing.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, this was Homo naledi. This was a new species that we found in this cave that was preserved.
Was that pretty recent too? And they had evidence of tools, like stone tools or something?
I think a stone tool evidence that goes back a little farther. This is from, I think it was 2013 it started, and the propositions came around.
But getting back to my original question, then, so that means we based on all that, we weren't an exoplanet per se, not the way people are talking about it, as in we flew here on spaceships. And well, some people say, oh, it was an exoplanet, we came here and that civilization died out and we had to start over again. You've heard all those kind of stories.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like however you look at that, you still have to explain where that species came from. It's like the case where you have to explain where God came, like what created the creator and all that.
Well, it's probably easier.
God's God.
Sorry?
Bad joke. I said that would be God's God.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's yeah. So I mean, some people call it lazy thinking, but it's also like quite logical that could happen. Like this has been a well-examined proposition that a lot of people have fleshed out in detail.
I don't think it's lazy thinking. I think it's like at the end of the day, it's like something started that before it started here. You know? Like,
yeah.
What would be freaky is if the original creators, those had somehow been destroyed or lived out their eternal lives somehow, and now we're on this path of true entropy, you know, where there's no. That's a depressing thought, isn't it? No more rebirth or.
Well, that's you can think of it like a legacy, like a universal legacy or something like that, where if we're these introspection devices that are able to perceive the universe, like if that came from other planets, that just makes the story that much more special, in my opinion.
What Arthur was just saying about like the creation taking out the creator, I think relates highly to the movie The Terminator. Just like like we're creating artificial intelligence and robots, and obviously there's that fear that AI robots will take over the earth. So maybe something like that happened to where the creator made something and now they're in a battle.
It's funny. AI was one of the subjects I was going to bring up if we started getting dead air.
I'll be right back in 30 seconds. Yep.
Okay. Have you played around much with Chat GPT?
A little bit. I did I played some of the games when they came out. It was AI Dungeon, I think, and there was like a Cthulhu theme. So you got to go through this like this story that was kind of like build your own story. That was really interesting because you could really test it and like see how intelligent it was by the answers that you gave to its questions. But I haven't really like got into GPT-3 itself.
It's funny you say that about testing because I've been trying to discover like human bias that's built into.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of your videos on that.
Yeah, and I'm working on a video right now that's really kind of funny because it's almost like I get into this, not an argument, but like a real debate with the AI keeps acting as if it doesn't present personal opinions, but it's actually presenting personal opinion.
Yeah.
Well, it feels like it is. I know it's not, but it's kind of funny because it can't help at this stage. AI is advanced enough not to reflect the human training, right? AI is not to that. To me, now this is my impression. I'm honestly, and I know just a tiny bit because I volunteered for the Galileo project and helped them with their. I was a volunteer on the machine learning on that project, but just a very little bit, right? I'm not really enough to understand the whole process, but I do know that human input, right? The current AI, for me, I can tell I can see the human influence still. I think it's going to be another maybe 10 or 15, 20 years before you won't recognize the human interface or the human data sets. Right now, the data sets from humans show bias in the AI from what I've seen. I think it's going to be,
I mean, that's really important to look for that. I think I also think it could be natural, like, well, for two things here. Like, I listen to a lot of AI research. I watch Lex Friedman podcast a lot, and he has a lot of AI experts on that. And I've heard we might hit human level, or AGI is what it is, like artificial general intelligence. It could be in the next 10 years, next 50 years. And I need to actually like type out the stats on this because I should take a survey on it. But I've also heard people say that it's never going to happen. Like Chomsky doesn't think it's going to happen. A bunch of other people are saying that, and the way that they describe it makes a lot of sense. And they also describe it in a way where if it did happen, like it still wouldn't be like us, because self-awareness and consciousness requires a human body, like requires the mind and body as a connection. This is also something to worry about if you plan to cryo-freeze yourself. If you do, try to do the $100,000 option, which is freezing your whole body, because in the future, if you just do the $30,000 option and just freeze your head, they may not be able to work with that. But I've just throwing that out there.
I have a feeling they won't work on my head either way.
Isn't Walt Disney frozen right now?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, what it seems like the other point I was going to make, this could be that what GTP3 is doing is what humans are already doing. So the bias that you're seeing, like we're all naturally biased based on the information that we pick up, and what GPT-3 is doing is searching the internet for, or at least this is what I've heard. It's just searching for scripts and searching for opinions of other people, and then it just either copy pastes that or like rephrases it, and that's essentially what we're doing.
Well, but see, right now, that was kind of the point I was trying to make to people earlier on Twitter. It's not searching the internet. Its data sets are fixed since 2021. That's the thing.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So its bias was installed at that point. My theory is that whatever, and I'm not saying a purposeful bias. I'm saying that since we're human, our humanness got installed along with the data sets. It's just like take something as simple as like today or yesterday, I said, list 3 articles or research articles on climate change. And it listed 3 articles on climate change. Then I said, list 3 opposition articles, right? So in the first response, it didn't give any disclaimers at all, right? In the second batch, first of all, I had to argue with it for like 5 prompts before it would even list the 3 articles on opposition research, right? And then it would give a disclaimer. Well, this is not, you know what I mean? It was like a warning about the following information. That's a bias, right? Because if I ask it to list 3 opposition articles or research papers, it should have just listed them just like it listed the 3 pro climate change, right?
Yeah.
See what I mean? So there's a bias built in. There's a human bias built into the data where there was a warning placed on opposition research, which all it was research about the sun's effect on the earth. The one I was looking for, and I finally got it to prompt, was research about the sun's effect on climate change. That's all it was. So why would I need a warning or some kind of resistance or some kind of this is, you know what I mean? So it's very easy to sort of get the human bias out of it right now. I mean, maybe in 10 or 15 years, I think maybe it would be more, right?
It'd be more refined.
Maybe more refined to the point to where, or that it might be worse. I also have this thing where, I have this image in my head that I call it the scripture, that at some point AI will become the scripture that we all must believe in, we must agree upon, right?
Right now, Google is kind of that, right? And people that use DuckDuckGo or something else are thinking out, they're like crazy.
That's what I think. That's where I think it's going. I thought this for a while, is that if it does hit AGI level, it'll be able to solve wars. It'll be able to solve economic issues. Like we'll be able to have it analyze, thousands of data sets that we can't keep up with and come up with the best answer. And we'll treat it like an oracle. Like we'll end up treating it like something that has all the answers for us.
But I mean, people like Putin aren't going to listen to the AI if it says, take your tanks and go home.
I wouldn't say it's just going to solve wars flat out like that, but it's going to be probably the strongest answer for that is how can we?
I can't see Putin requesting the answer either.
And on the other side of the spectrum, same with NATO. I can't see them asking, they'd be like, oh, well, you should probably just leave Ukraine alone and the war will stop.
I agree. 100%. Right.
Yeah.
Why, do we really want to send tanks? Maybe that's a question. Do we want to send tanks to Ukraine? Do we really want to send tanks if anything's going to escalate the war, it's going to be us sending jets and tanks. And
I really wonder how ChatGPT would answer that, honestly. Like, that's a good question to ask it.
Yeah.
That might be a fun YouTube video to make.
What's funny is first it'll give you, it's a little disclaimer. I'm a artificial intelligence designed by OpenAI, blah blah blah. I don't have personal opinions. It has a little disclaimer, and then it'll go on to say, but just like it did with the climate change thing, but so it's like, here comes the bias.
Yeah, I can definitely see that emerging. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Once artificial intelligence starts making its own artificial intelligence, maybe after a few generations of that, we'll actually get to where it's not human biased, but the original seed still came from the human.
Well, I'm also trying to like narrow down how it could be that it necessarily needs, but like for it to be completely unbiased, it would have to give all of the options, and there are infinitely many options, or there are infinitely many answers. So it kind of has to give disclaimers. Or
no, it could be based on statistics, though. It's like I ask it, is it a good idea to defund police departments, right? And it gave the political answer. Well, there are studies that show that some communities have had luck with programs, blah blah blah. And I said, well, isn't it true that crime has risen in those areas? Well, you're correct. And it goes on to talk about the statistics, how the crime rate has risen. But you see, there's always that level of bias that you're getting first, and then if you keep prompting it, you'll get the data that you're not looking for. But maybe that's early AI, right? It's not it's not that advanced. But
I think 50 years down the line, yeah.
Here's why I think humans will eventually rebel against AI. Let's say that we come up with the perfect law of the land, right? Thou shalt not kill. We all agree that shouldn't happen.
Right.
What's going to happen when we have AI judges and AI jury members that look strictly on the law of the land? And and that's maybe not a good case, but and look at how many criminals now are let go, or there's bail or whatever. They kill people and they're just let out of jail. Are people really going to go for the perfect law decider? If it say the law decider becomes AI, are they really going to go for that?
I think like in the future, like the distant future, when this becomes more reliable, we might start trusting the machines more. I mean, I was going to say like we have kind of a semi-oracle.
That would require every person giving up their political bias, though, because where I think people shouldn't be allowed to be, running around who've murdered people. Other people think they should be allowed to be, rehabilitated outside of prison. There's always going to be those two viewpoints, right?
I think this circles back to what Patrick said in the beginning. Like, if you weren't part of the tribe, you get kicked out. You need to have a good function, or you're out of the tribe.
That's why I say humans will eventually rebel against artificial intelligence. Out of then they'll be saying, "Wow, that was dumb. Why did we do this?" It's kind of like the Terminator issue with the with the machines.
Yeah, when I think about it, I can definitely see Terminator situations coming. I mean, there are people that say that we could like put preventatives against that, though, and the way they describe it seems pretty logical too. I mean, I did want to say that we do have kind of an example of where this is helping us decide which news sources are the most reliable. There's something I heard about from Daniel Schmachtenberger, which you guys should look at, or you should also look into his stuff. He's a social philosopher, I think is the term. Also brilliant guy and incredible orator, like one of the greatest communicators I know that's living today. The societylibrary.org is a website that filters the internet and it uses artificial intelligence to look at biases. Like it's essentially is a bias searching program that looks for the most reliable sources and it determines the reliability of those sources based on reviews and a lot of other stats that I can't really get into. And it shows you like options. Like it doesn't tell you what to think, but it shows you like these are the most accurate and the most information that we have about the subject. And it lets you like pick from all that. And I'm doing a terrible job of describing this, but
no, I get it 100%. But see, that's kind of my point with people rebelling, because you're still going to have human points of view, and those people are going to want to have power, right? Somebody's going to want to control Congress. The people who control Congress are going to control the grants to science foundations. they're going to get the research they want based on the grants. So there's always going to be biases in the human realm, right? I think we're at some point we're going to become incompatible. I think humans are going to become incompatible with artificial intelligence.
Well, I think an easy way to bring that down to earth too is to even think about designing a house. So there's the most efficient home structure, right? And there's one structure that's the most efficient when it comes to heating, cooling, this, and that. But everybody wants their own home, right? And they want it to be a little bit different based off of their taste and their style. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think that we will end up being robots because we are human. We all have our own flavor.
I've kind of combined this with have you seen Midnight Journey or Mid Journey? I keep wanting to say Midnight Journey. Mid Journey, the artificial intelligence that creates images. I've experimented with architecture with that software, and so that was one thing I thought we need to combine. To me, it won't be too far along where an owner or developer can put in a set of parameters and out comes a set of construction documents, right?
Yeah.
That would be very easy to have artificial intelligence.
Yeah, you mentioned something like that on one of your videos. I totally agreed. Like when I watched that, was
and insight. So and then maybe if we have more archetypes, you could say I want mid-century ranch, or I want ultra contemporary, or I want a farmhouse, right? And based on that and the parameters, maybe you'll end up coming up with some. Honestly, I could show you my library of Midjourney. I've got like 1,000 images, and every one of them, all the modern homes are different.
Huh.
So I think it somehow makes it, even if you put the same prompt in twice, it'll come up with a different image. Right. I think that in some ways, for art, maybe the artist is dead to a certain extent. Human art may be extinct to a certain extent, but I see what you're saying, Alexei, where if I was hearing you right.
There's the most efficient structure. I mean, that's why bees use the honeycomb, right? Because it's the least amount of material for the strength provided, this, and that. So there's like honeycomb structure becomes like the shape, just theoretically. Right. And so now AI says honeycomb structure is the best shape for all buildings that are on the planet.
But if you notice, those honeycomb shapes are just little building blocks that they put together. And then, because I've kept bees for a while, and so if they go into a natural space, they kind of conform, but they still have that basic structure.
Well, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like if there's a river, they'll honeycomb around the river. If there's
you can still have an efficient space, like a buckyball, that you create a character, a structure with character.
I'm just saying it kind of disregards the individuality.
No, right? I get it. I think that's why I'm saying we're going to have to develop AI that we build in the bias of character.
That'll be quite a task
because every house would look the same. Right. With that perfect.
It's also interesting, from what I understand, like the triangle is the most structurally sound arrangement, I believe. But we are seeing this like honeycomb. I think like when you have a lot of the same thing, it supports itself best in the honeycomb structure, which is interesting. You were talking about that with Brad on the the 1 atom thick graphene that we see where you run the magnetic field through that. That's like the best option for that. So it's interesting, like even at the atomic scale, that's the most integral, or the most like structurally reliable arrangement. Yeah, I could definitely see the application there for construction, because with construction, you're working with like lines and relatively simple physics, relatively simple. I don't want to say simple because you can get really complicated with like buildings and engineering, but yeah, that would be where I would see this.
Even in architecture, we create wall types. We have a schedule, wall type A, wall type B, wall type C, and it's just a wall assembly, right? It might be this one's concrete block with insulation, and the next one's metal studs, right? So you have all these wall types, and then the artificial intelligence just fills in It just draws the boundaries and places the little detail markers and dimensions it. And, you know, well, something as simple as spec writing. I was a
Not
spec
even
writer.
wall types, but even rooms in a condo. Unit A type, unit B type, right?
Yeah.
Type.
And
Yeah,
we,
exactly.
the thing is, we kind of already have this in construction. That's why I started thinking it's really only going to take some programmers to do this, and it's already practically there.
Yeah, I mean, we
It's
have house printing. Like
Yep.
we have road printers, and we also have house printers now where they just lay concrete along like the lines.
I haven't seen the road printer yet. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, that's actually older. That's in a few countries right now where it's like that's the most efficient thing for people to do is just build a giant printer that just lays out the brick, and then it uses gravity to set the bricks in place or set the stones.
I've seen those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
really cool.
I've seen the houses, but I hadn't seen the road yet. Yeah.
That's really
I saw with the houses, they had 2 train tracks that were going, and then the machine was basically just driving back and forth on train tracks, dropping in concrete, building like the walls of a house.
Like a huge 3D printer almost.
Giant
Yeah.
3D printer, easiest way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to tangent a bit, but the concept of 3D printing, this has been around for 35 years now, but we're taking it really far now. The idea of building self-organizing modules in space, sending up 3D printer. Oh yeah, that's
That's
awesome.
my latest 3D print, a cone.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of printing, this is something that Elon Musk was talking about too. You can use the Starship to send up 3D printers and have them build whatever we want in space, even build civilization on Mars essentially, or build buildings before we get there, which is much more cost effective because it's what $100,000 per cubic foot for storage space on a spaceship right now. So to have have a printer do our stuff for us, that's going to take us pretty far too.
All you need is about 15 swarm bots with one of them being the main 3D printer. The other ones are mining bots, right? And then you have what I call the elemental printer, and basically you dump your raw material into these little tubes, and now it can just print what it needs to, and it can combine structures, put them together.
What's the best Boston Dynamics robot? What's his name? I wouldn't be surprised if we have a couple of those on Mars already.
Yeah, those are really interesting too.
Yeah, I follow their channel. It's awesome.
I don't see why they wouldn't just be free floating around space either, with just little jetpacks.
Well, that's why you build the space modules. The billionaires are going to go vacation in the next few years. Probably literally in the next decade, that's going to become a feasible option.
I think so.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. Especially with spin launch, right? Spin launch can launch out a structure.
Yeah. Oh, that's just mind blowing.
I think it's pretty wild. They're hitting 10,000 Gs, but launching out from Earth, just spinning really fast and shooting into space.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
You look at it, it's just a massive engineering project.
I was thinking about this generational thing just yesterday. I was talking with Barrett, and I said, "Do you realize I'm the generation where there was no internet and no computers, and you're the generation that's really grown up with them, and my grandson is going to be probably stepping foot on Mars possibly."
Yeah, it could be.
It's like we're living in that period where we went from nothing to boom, technology out the wazoo.
I think that sounds about right. Yeah.
I mean, Heraclitus was the first, not the first one. This has been the Oracle of Delphi talks about this is know that things will change around you. But yeah, the idea that we were in an ever-flowing river, man never steps in the same river twice. Our ability to adapt to change since our species has been around has gone kind of like this, but technology hit and now it's going like this. And our ability to watch how generations change is extremely different than what it used to be just in the last couple of decades. I'm 33 years old now, and I also grew up without a cell phone, and I didn't get a smartphone until I was in my 20s. I see 12-year-olds with cell phones that are swiping on TikTok, and I'm concerned. But I also see how there's advantages to that too. They'll be able to think faster and make decisions faster.
That was one thing I noticed growing up, because the internet, I'm 38, so the internet came out right when I was 13 or 14 in a way.
Right.
And it was wow, I love the internet because I can move faster on the internet than I can in real life. I noticed that was a huge thing. I was I can actually perform, move, think, and the computer can respond quicker than other humans can. So it can actually, it accelerates our ability to think. So I thought that was kind of cool.
I think there's a bell curve, and this was what I was trying to. This is the thing that Bernardo saved me on the toe. Was I had a graph. I had drawn this graph that basically showed that the more involved artificial intelligence becomes in our lives, the human intelligence will tend to drop.
Yeah.
And
Or intuition, maybe. But yeah.
What's that?
Just like intuition or like common sense will go away.
Well, I mean, it's like me. I'm a designer. I'm a spec writer. I'm a builder. If I have some artificial intelligence creating construction drawings, specifications, design for me every day, am I going to lose that ability?
Yep.
I mean, I think I will. Or either that, or I'll get lazy.
I think the easiest way for me to relate is with the traffic system. Right now we have red lights, green lights, stop signs everywhere, and it's like, imagine if there were no traffic lights. You have to see if it's clear, right? And so that takes an extra ability. It takes an understanding of motion and speed and being able to make your own decisions. And now all you have to do is literally follow a blue line on your cell phone, stop at the light. It's like free thinking, the ability to actually have to think to survive is diminishing.
Imagine now, I mean, and who would have thought when I was a kid that we would have self-driving cars?
Yeah.
Well, we dreamed about it, but we didn't think it was going to be a reality. We watched the Jetsons.
Yeah, I mean, the example of the navigation problem, like I've personally experienced that, where like when I was in my youth, I could like notice myself developing an ability to navigate, and then my smartphone came along, and I can see how that has actually impacted my ability to navigate.
You know what?
Said, you can also go, apparently you can go to the Amazon or one of the tribes that lives in Amazon and stay with them for a couple months or so, and you can develop their form of mental 3D map which is like the strongest example that we see. I forget the person that did this, but the way that she described it was just like that. She spent a couple months with them, and she suddenly noticed herself having a rich visual image of a 3D map of the whole territory wherever she would move her head. And so there's like a part of our brains that's like the mapping system, whatever that is, that's probably there and will always be available to be expanded on, I guess. I think it's going to take generations before we see like actual genetic alteration.
I don't think it's that far, because I remember when my son Alex was in Scouts, I was assistant scoutmaster, and we would take them orienteering, right? And they had a hard time wrapping their heads around this idea that there was this compass and a map, and that you had to, you know what I mean? That they couldn't use their GPS on their phone to get to where they were going. And I was thinking, you know what? I have a 3-dimensional Earth in my head, and I am aware of where I am on that Earth at any given time. But these young people don't have that same awareness, right? They didn't even know, they couldn't stand in the middle of the woods and tell you where the sun rose, in the sky in the morning, or where it sat, in the evening. It was kind of bizarre.
Yeah, that would be something that we definitely need to continue teaching in public school, at least, I would say.
That's proprioception, right? Being aware of the 3D environment in a way.
Yes,
and so I think that's a skill that's definitely diminishing at this point in time. And like, what a good example for me is I did a lot of construction, and one of our employees was younger. He's about 15 years younger than me, so he's like 20. But he's like, I said, go east. He said, which way is east? Like, it's east, man. It's east. Like that's what way east is.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I was fortunately raised as a scout too. I got Eagle Scout, and my brother did as well, and we were very fun things like that.
Alex's arrow of lights hanging on the wall in my tiny cabin over there.
That's the real nitty gritty, getting the arrow of light.
It was awesome, and I got to be an assistant scoutmaster through the whole thing. It was awesome.
Heck yeah.
But yeah,
I can see that happen.
Those are the days. Those are the skill sets that are really kind of going away, being lost. But I imagine humans will evolve into something. I don't know what it will be.
I mean, I like to think of it like, I mean, the friends that I've talked to that are existentialists, I kind of side with on this. Like, our cell phones, like, they are changing the way that we integrate with the world. I do believe that the genetic advantages that we have with the proprioceptive abilities will probably still be there for a few many generations. But like, we're very much using these as an extension of ourselves. Like, I mean, this to me is the most valuable item that I own. It is an extension of me. It is how I connect to the rest of the world, and it also is an offload from my memory, which is dangerous. That there's danger in that, but there's also advantage in that. Like, it needs to be examined. This is something that has to be taught in public schools, but we don't have classes for things like that. I'm trying to write about it now, and I'm seeing like how this is really, really hard to get along with. But you can see how you can like form a structure of, it's like techno-sapien ideology, I guess you could say. Like we're approaching the age of the techno-sapien, and the way that we integrate best with these devices has to be deeply examined. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge advantage. Like my life has been radically altered by the refinement of the internet over the last decade, and the fact that I have this device.
Just to play devil's advocate, you said it's a huge advantage. Where do you see the disadvantages?
And the memory offloading and the GPS, that issue, I don't think that's something that, at least like in my lifetime and in our single lifetime, I think that having these devices will completely eliminate our ability to navigate or take away any of that permanently. Like I can't permanently do that. That being said, the way that neuroplasticity works and the default node network seem to work would somewhat suggest otherwise, I guess, because the brain very much works on compartmentalization and the reduction of energy, or just energy conservation. Drbeki talks about this like combinatorial explosion. Actually, that's not his term. I forget who it is, but the brain will reach a state of too many combinations, and that is called combinatorial explosion in cognitive science. And so anything that can be avoid, or like anything that can avoid that, the brain will do essentially. And that's why we form bias. That's why we use labels. That's why we do the grabbing onto the labels to structure our ego. Instead of taking the extra energy to think open-mindedly, we're naturally closed-minded. And again, I don't mean to touch on this, but knowing that that's the case for most people can garner a lot of empathy and patience with them, because you know that most people are subjected to this compartmentalization system that the brain is going on with. So that's something to definitely be aware of. That also should be taught in public school, I think, K through 12, especially if you're going to try to integrate with one of these devices. You have to like deeply examine yourself, deeply consistently introspect on yourself to garner agency, to be able to have like volitional control over your life, especially, but also how you interact with technology and how that technology is changing you.
I think awareness is probably the number one key, thing that you're referring to. Just having the awareness. It's like knowing what you don't know, or
Knowing that you don't know,
knowing that you don't know,
Yeah.
not knowing what you. The idea that complete objectivity has always been something. I don't know. For some reason, that's always been a goal, and through that process, you realize how difficult it is, to reach this point of, Zen objectivity, because it's very difficult to erase the bias. What's this comment, Virginia? What's this?
Transhumanism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we have been going for 2 hours. Have you got any other pressing issues to save humanity? That's why we're here.
Well, I guess like going back to the beginning, Alexei mentioned this idea of laminar flow as kind of like a guidance system, and then when we get out of that flow, that's a beautiful metaphor. I also have like similar ideas. I think it lines up with this idea of gutter rails. Like I talk about that with universal embodiment, like the idea that if you're a universe experiencing itself in this human vessel, the idea would be you want a set of rules for yourself that are well examined. And you arrive at examining those rules by examining yourself and how that interacts with the rest of the world in your bioecological system. So if you don't have the gutter rails on, you can end up in the gutter. And if you have them on, you have some play between that. Like you have some give between the rails where you can still make it to the pins or your goal in life. Whereas if you don't have those gutter rails, you see what most of society is doing. They're mostly doing the compartmentalization thing. They're mostly not to no fault of their own or to very little fault of their own. They don't realize the capacity for self-control they have and the capacity for garnering agency that they have.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah.
I noticed this is how aware I am of this. I noticed a bias in your statement. You called Alexei's philosophy a metaphor.
Well, I was about to say it's a great metaphor.
Well,
That he
they're all metaphors.
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah,
Well,
no, it's a metaphor.
I've been keeping
The water faucet metaphor. It's the
I know,
metaphor.
but it's
Yeah.
kind of funny. The reason I brought this up is because we've had several people who were, scientists and physicists, and when they hear Alexei's version of his theory of everything, they're like, "Oh, that's a beautiful metaphor," while their theory is like concrete.
Oh yeah, that's not
No,
what I intended to bring up. I just
no,
saying,
I know, and I know you didn't. I just thought it, and that's the only reason I brought it up, because I knew you would take that the right way.
I feel like you're talking about your friend who worked for NASA.
Yeah. He's one of those people, and he
Yeah.
doesn't watch my videos, so I don't have to worry about it anyway. But I just thought it's funny how. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's for some reason that's something I pick up on a lot.
I mean, you could even
Oh,
say
cool.
argue in quotes, right? That all language is a metaphor to describe what you're trying to.
That's what I meant by that. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I
And
totally
again,
understand
Patrick,
that. Like,
I wasn't that wasn't a criticism of you.
no, I thought it was great.
It's something I've noted that for some reason it always registers on my radar, but I don't know why. It's a bias I can't erase.
I think we all have. Like,
I think it's because I'm defending
time.
my friend. I feel like when you become a friend of someone, you feel like you have to help defend their toe.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to get to a point where I can defend Brad's toe, though. I don't know. I'm just not with the hologram thing yet, but we'll get there.
The word hologram.
We'll get there. We'll get there, Brad, if you're watching.
Yeah, this is the process. We compare ideas, and we don't. Well, in this instance, this wasn't really a comparison, but we share our ideas, and we try to we have the thesis, the antithesis, and we try to find out the synthesis.
Well, it seems like the bowling lane is the laminar flow. When you hit the gutter, now you're separating karmic cycles.
Yeah, and you can be the idea of the fluid where I know what you mean by laminar flow, because I actually watch this from Smarter Every Day, which is another great channel. You can see how it continues itself because it is continuance of the water molecules bonding to each other, and they continue to bond to each other when it goes off and it creates water droplets. Those are still molecular bonds, and those are still identity. You could still have an identity with that, and you could chase the wrong identity in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's where it's like when you drift to the edge of the laminar flow, the pressure differences just based off of fluid dynamics will create a little vortice and then bring you back to center. So it's like I try to just think physics only, and so it's like we live in this laminar flow of creation, and when we push too hard with our free will, it takes us into spirals of delusion, which translates to turbulent flows, and that ultimately brings you back to the laminar flow.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great way to look at it.
Simple, but I like the bowling alley one, the bowling lane as well. Like if you want to hit the pin, you got to be in that laminar flow to the pin, right? Yeah. Like the straight path. The path of least resistance.
We have all these ideas. People are coming together with we're knocking on the same door. We're trying to figure out the truths and the way to construct a belief system. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. Construct a way of looking at life that lines up with all the ways of looking at it, I guess.
And see, my toe is actually that the truth is undefinable, so that if we don't keep coming together and talking about our ideas, that the fact that the truth is undefinable keeps us coming together for that search, right? I don't think in our existence the truth is attainable. So I think if we don't, it's almost like a hobby.
What's interesting to me is that
us getting together, talking about different ideas.
I feel like the truth is only definable because we're attempting to define it. Now, maybe this is too far into it, but say I'm telling you my truth. I'm holding a pen. Can we all agree upon that? But didn't we define this as a pen?
That's a fact. That's a fact. It's not
and it's a fact. But we defined it as a pen. So we're the ones that originally created the definition of truth. Now we're comparing it to other people. And if you're in Argentina, you'd say it's a pluma.
That's truth, not the truth.
It's a truth. Yeah. Because it can also be a tube of metal with a stick that has ink inside of it. It could also, it can be a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about empirical truth versus ontological truth, and we're searching for the most ontological truth because we want to have what is true to us line up best with reality as it is. I think that's how you describe ontological, or reality as it actually is. And we don't know how reality actually is. And we don't know how close we are to understanding how reality really is. Physics has gotten us very far. Math has gotten us very far. But it could be that there are other ways of looking at it that could also, I mean, certainly spirituality and certainly art and steam hams, that whole idiom or abbreviation, that's crucial too. And to examine that, like we have aesthetic philosophy we've been trying to bring together and like understand what's at the heart of aesthetic. Like Hegel got into this deeply, but it could be that it's not something to be examined, like it's something to be expressed more so.
And
Or it's a constant journey. It's the journey is the enjoyable part, I guess, not the destination.
Yeah.
That's where it comes to being able to appreciate, just in my opinion, right? Like in my opinion, my biased opinion, it just comes down to like, can you appreciate your existence? It's like I feel like that's the most important thing. And people that are angry and creating all these wars and all that nonsense, they lack the ability to appreciate existence. And so it's
the simple things in life.
The simple things, yeah.
Right? I don't need Ukraine. I don't have to conquer Ukraine. I'm happy with my little tiny shack in the woods. You know, I don't need to conquer other
I used
countries.
to need a lot of things too, and like now at this point in my life, I could care less if I achieve them or not.
Yeah, it's also like instilling meanings, what we're talking about there, and that's you can derive meaning from acquiring things and acquiring material objects, as well as money, as well as status, and those are all superficial and unfulfilling. As far as I've been able to assess, the greatest way to instill meaning in your life is to do unto others, is to live in service to others and try to make the world a better place.
I agree with that statement.
Well, sure. You can almost end the chat on the podcast and then.
I think that's a beautiful ending.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right.
Yeah, that was funny when I was I always said that I wasn't going to try to teach my kids anything like I wasn't going to create this dogma around religion, right? That I was going to show them the golden rule, right? Treat others as you want to be treated, or that you should be, you know, and that they really became really awesome adults, you know, because it's really living that example is what, you know, instills that value system in them. But you said it better, so I'm going to be quiet, Patrick.
Yes,
you did it better. Excuse me, I'm getting hoarse too, so that means we have to. And it has been 2 hours, and I hope you'll come back sometime, Patrick.
Oh, it's awesome discussion.
If I find you interesting, you get to come back. You get invited back, so you're automatically invited back. So
interesting.
No, I have a feeling about people. I really only have to, like, I don't know, get just a little touch of someone, and I'm like, they're interesting. I want to talk to them.
So, yeah. Well, I really appreciate you having me on. This is awesome.
Yeah, I really like people who are smart and objective at the same time. You know, I feel like you've got that. You and Alexei both. Because I remember the first time I met Alexei, you know, you know, he would bend. It was like he was Bruce Lee. He was bending around my philosophy to help me with his.
That's where it circles all the way back to, like, so we're trying to use words, metaphors to express an understanding, but like words have been created by man from the beginning of word creation. And so it's like, when I say see or we or yes or da or whatever, I'm saying the same thing. I agree, like, or that's cool with me. But like, you get what I'm saying? Like, it's all just words at the end of the day.
I don't know how many times he toned me down by just saying that he agreed. It was kind of funny. I was like, wait a minute, you're not supposed to agree. It's funny. But anyway, I appreciate both you guys, and we'll get together again soon.
Sure.
And thanks to the audience for all the questions and comments. It's awesome to see you guys out there. It's really
I think we're still live.
I know. I'm getting ready to click the button.
I'm pretty sure it hasn't. I'm just doing like the opposite of our beginning joke. So it's like, are we? I think it still says live.
I think we are.
Okay, we'll see you guys later. Talking to the audience. I'll see you on the next PiFi. What was this? 69 is next. Uh oh. Watch out for PiFi 69.
See you.
See you guys.
Oh, did he leave?